Hey, I'm Audra Carroll, and this is Coming in Hot, where my guest and myself mostly talk about mindset theories and real practical ways that you can improve your lifestyle, your relationships, your health, and yourself. Good evening, guys. I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. I have brought on the lovely Miss Heidi Hoke again, and we are discussing tonight self-healing, how people self-heal, and why people do not self-heal. So we're going to jump right on into the episode, and like I said before, I hope you enjoy it. Tell me your story, I guess, the core of the crux of where you learned about self-healing.
I began to have what were misdiagnosed. They were either misdiagnosed or undiagnosed attacks when I was about 13. And I had always stuttered, had a very severe stuttering problem from the age of 3, I guess. Reading problems, learning disabilities, just really struggled in academics. But when I was about 13, I started having these mysterious, what seemed to be at the time, mysterious attacks. Mm-hmm. And they were emotional, but they were also very, very physiological. And they were misdiagnosed as being panic attacks. And they didn't, even the doctors, and now you understand, I'm in my 60s, so to be fair, in the early 70s, doctors didn't know a lot about this. They didn't have the understanding of mind-body correlation and the interaction of the mind-body. It was either one or the other. You were either sick physically or you were sick mentally, but the two did not come together.
Right, there's very much a disconnect there.
Oh, it was terrible. So naturally, I would be having physical symptoms, but emotional type symptoms as well, and they basically just didn't know what to do with me. As far as the stuttering goes, they didn't know what to do. So as a child, I was put on phenobarbital. I was like a little drug addict from the time I was 3, 4, 5 years old. And wow. I'm sure I was over medicated. Well, anybody in their right mind right now knows that a little brain that is developing like that on those kind of medications, that's going to really have some very, very adverse effects.
Right.
So went along. These things were never fully diagnosed. To make a very long story short, they ended up being, it ended up being epilepsy. I was having seizures. And by the time I just kind of crippled along through my life, adjusting and accommodating the fact that I had a very severe stuttering problem. By this time, I was having very severe facial and verbal type tics, and the seizures. And, no one really knew what to do. My mom and dad, I'm sure they did everything that they knew to do, took me to every medical professional they could, but there was never, any real solution or diagnosis. Well, I rocked along through life, uh, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. So throughout, I guess I was in my early 30s, I was rocking my second child, and just as some fluke would happen, I rocked back through a window and had a closed brain injury. My head went through the glass window, and the seizures got worse. They just got worse. But because they got worse, they began to develop in a way that it was more definitive. And then the neurologists then at that time were able to fully identify them as being seizures. And so they just got bad. All I can say is they just got worse. They got more frequent. They got more severe. And as they got more severe, my mood swings began to be more emphatic, more extreme. Stuttering got worse.
Ask you, what emotional toll was that taking on you, going through all of this physical stuff? I mean, it had to be. It had to be taking a toll.
Sure. And what I'll tell what it does is it has a very direct effect on your self-image and your self-identity. Through that, I think I had an underlying self-image of getting by on my looks, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And if I couldn't speak and I couldn't manage myself, boy, darn girl, you better be good looking.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through very, very dysfunctional relationships, um, three divorces before I was 25, very high risk behavior.
Mm-hmm.
That began to be begin to be a theme in lieu of all of the seizures. And I think as a result of that, it was a very, very erratic lifestyle of just getting through one day at a time. I learned one day at a time very, very quickly, and I learned that in a mode of survival, just always being in a survival mode. And so finally, after my third divorce, I had 3 children, single mom. I ended up working in a profession that just fit my physiological and my emotional roller coasters. And that ended up being a technical illustrator in a cubicle behind a computer doing circuit board design, because I didn't have to talk to anybody. I didn't have to talk to the phone. On the phone, I didn't have to look at anybody. I can just sit in my cubicle behind the computer and, draw circuits.
So you
And
found a way to be able to create the environment for what
it,
you had self-identified.
exactly. And whether I enjoyed it or not was irrelevant.
Right.
I made myself enjoy it. And the enjoyment of it was the release of stress, because I didn't have to stress out about hiding or accommodating the illness.
Right.
And so to go back a little bit, after I had that closed head injury when I was rocking my baby, I believe I had a very, very severe seizure that created one of 2 things, and I don't quite know which one it was, and I've decided that it doesn't matter. It was either a near-death experience or it was some sort of alternate state that developed a path of healing.
Mm-hmm.
It was the the absolute stereotypical, what you hear over and over and over, of going through the tunnel of light and meeting and having an experience on the other side, which I did. And that is probably another show, but to the point of that is that the messages that were downloaded to me were as I was going to get worse before I got better, but it was all a plan, and it was a very well orchestrated plan, and it was something that I would be able to um, manage, just to trust it. Just don't question it, just trust it and move through it. So I went back through that. Well, now in hindsight, I was able to see that it was one day when I was at work um, in my cubicle, and I had 12 seizures before they could get me to the hospital. 12 really ugly grand mal seizures, and it happened again. And when about 2 weeks later, and then after it happened the second time, I didn't come out of that very well, and I was remained in a vegetative state for a long period of time, just going
Wow.
back and forth with seizures, 10 or 12 seizures, grand mal seizures per day.
Wow.
And with, three little, by that time I had, another baby. So three small school age children in that vegetative state, and um, lost everything, literally lost everything. And it
Wow.
was, yeah, and it was a time when I was then becoming very suicidal and self-destructive. And that's when my healing journey began. It was when I got so low to the ground that I couldn't get any lower than face down on the ground,
Right.
literally. And so that's when I began to start my healing process. Um, I do a lot of lectures, and when as I do those, I always get the question: if you were so low and in such a desperate, unconscious, vegetative state like this, how do you begin a healing process like that?
Yes.
And I think there is a very fundamental um, process when you become so extremely spent. Number one, it's very, very humbling.
Hmm.
And when you become very, very humbled, you become very, very grateful. And I remember the first stage of my healing was throwing every pill that had been prescribed to me for seizures that did not work, to throw every one of those in the toilet, crawl back to bed, and just allow. And that allowance put me into a place where I was forced to be grateful for who I was other than what I was in my physical form.
That's it right there.
That was it. And when I was able to embrace the divinity of my soul, irrelevant of what my body was experiencing, that was when I found my God.
Mhm.
And finding my God gave me then a partnership, a soul partnership. And a soul partnership then began my healing process. And in those times between seizures, when I wasn't able to move, I learned, I got, I got to get to know my own brain function. And in that process too, I began to learn to love myself in my present state. If I couldn't move, if I couldn't eat, if I couldn't get out of the bed, if I couldn't function, I still realized that there was a divine soul that within myself that deserved love, unconditional love. And I began then, rather to fight my illness, I began to accept it as being a part of my contract, a part of myself, that if I was going to love my divine self, my divine soul, I must also accept the physiological state that I was in at that moment, in an element of faith that this was to be resurrected.
Mm-hmm.
This situation was resurrectable. Because where there's death, there is rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
And I made the decision to rebirth. In that state, I made the conscious decision to heal. And I learned that healing is not about fighting a disease or a condition. It's about embracing it, loving it, and moving it.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And that's where I started. That's
Move.
where I started. And it was I learned how to control movements through I think on some level I learned self-hypnosis, I learned imagery, I learned how to move beyond what was apparent at the time through strengthening my intent. And I don't know if that makes much sense.
Makes 100% sense
But
to me.
yeah, I learned that intent had more power than
Yes.
what I had earlier been aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Because I learned I began to fully understand the whole process of thought form, and form. When you think so intensely, you go into a state of thought form, and that is that creative process where thought becomes form, where what is intangible becomes tangible.
Mm-hmm.
And I begin to practice my thought form process all day long, all day long. If I couldn't move my arm, I thought about moving my arm. And when I thought about moving my arm long enough, my arm moved.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally had to teach myself everything over again. But it was there, so it didn't take long to teach myself all of that over again.
It was just about
And
unlocking all of those doors again, right?
exactly. And it took me about 7 years to recover. But within that
Yeah.
7 years, I was enjoying the journey of progress, and so I didn't feel like it was taking a long time. I was just happy from one day to the next.
Well,
And
like you said, you had made a mind shift. When you make the mind shift to accept, okay, this is where I am now,
right.
and now it's time to move forward. That intention alone, when you can connect, like you said, the intention and all of your emotion behind that is an. If I hope that someone out there can relate to this. I know someone can, but it's you can't describe what it's like on this earth for that to happen. I don't think, because it's hard to describe it in that way, because when that mind shift happens, it's everything changes, everything around you, your environment, the way you perceive things, the way you feel things. Just, I don't know, that just that feeling to me is earth moving alone.
I understand exactly what you're saying. And I just experienced my whole reality was completely shifted to the element to where everything about my life changed. The people around me, the people I surrounded myself with and around, and the whole process completely shifted. But I think I went into like about a 7-year time of just devoting my energy toward healing. And in order to do that at that time, of course, internet, online schools, all online colleges were laughed at that time. You know how that was in the early 80s. They said it would never catch on, and so I found the only school available for natural healing. It was Global College of Natural Medicine. It was the only one that I could find that I could I could handle. I couldn't, I still was not to a health level where I could drive or anything like that. But it just worked for me. It landed in my lap, and it was good, and it worked for me. And it was a way that I could take my situation and learn about it on a higher level than I could have just Googling it. And
can I ask you, at this point in time, did you have any forethought or feeling that, or what, I guess, do you know what the feelings were, the driving forces behind feeling like you needed to know more?
Oh, I wanted to get well. That was it. That was the
I was
only
about to
reason.
say,
Yeah, that
after
was
all you had seen you could do, did you ever sit there and go, I wonder what more I can do?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I was not happy with the fact I had gone from maybe 10 or 12 seizures a day to maybe 10 or 12 a month. And while that was a wonderful progress, and I was calling that a victory, it's still, well, I'll tell you, in 2005, I was still with doctors, and I was finally correctly diagnosed. I had treatment-resistant epilepsy, I had Tourette's syndrome, and I had bipolar. And I thought, you know what, girl, I can make this work in my favor. So, I took that wonderful obsessive, all the traits that are deemed destructive. I said, I can turn this around. Yeah,
Yes.
I can turn this around, And I became the most emphatic academic workaholic you could ever imagine. And I found something that I could use this to my favor. And everything I took to my favor. And as I began to heal, I was primarily focused on my seizures, but as I began to implement the natural medical protocol that I learned for my seizures, if you'll notice, my speech completely cleared up and my bipolar spontaneously stopped. The three were related. It was a situation of excitotoxicity. I understand what it is. I understand what was happening, and I understand how it happened. And I was able to correct it. And I did. So now I'm seizure free. I do public
It's a miracle
speaking.
in its own. Some people go their entire lives and never can figure out another way and suffer. It's terrible.
I would have oh, and it could have been me. I look at myself now and I thought, I could have ended up in the streets. I really could have. I could have seen that scenario had that resurrection not happened. But don't you think we have to allow resurrection?
Yes, absolutely. Like you said, I believe it's a partnership. It's
yes.
You have to give up. You have to give up some of your ego,
I was going to say, that's it.
People
That's
hate
it.
hearing that. They hate
I
hearing
know,
it.
and I know it becomes cliche when you say it. You try to, I try to avoid it, but there's no way to avoid it. It is.
Yeah.
It's about humbling. It's just you
Yes.
have to give it up. You have to realize that there is more to you than your conscious decision processes, and
Yes.
that's where the ego comes in. And when you let go of the conscious processes and allow the higher wisdom to take over. It's like our higher wisdom is our inner parent.
Mhm.
Um, it is our it is also our inner saint. Maybe that's a better way of describing it. It's our inner saint, and you have to trust your saint. You know, um, but yeah, to your point, you have to let go of your ego, and you have to realize that there's more to there there's more to you than is there. Therefore, give it up.
Mhm.
Give it
Oh,
up.
I totally agree.
You
You
know.
know, a lot of people, we I think we talked about this even in the last show. I bring it up quite often, but when you're dealing with anxiety, that is the
Mhm,
ego.
mhm.
And it's so hard for a lot of people to wrap their mind around that because it hurts their pride, their ego.
Right,
When you
right.
say, hey, look, maybe it's you puffing up your chest a little bit. But um I forgot exactly what I was going to say now. But once you let that go and you realize that all that is a way to exert control. And once you can
Yes.
understand that that anxiety is a manifestation of trying to control something, and that
Uh-huh.
you're trying to control things that you're not really meant to control, because like you were saying, you were living in everything that you were doing was living in the conscious world until you had this one divine moment
Mhm,
that set you on a different path
mhm,
and said, hold up, sister, this is not what life is about.
mhm.
It's so, it's just so moving to me. But anyway, I don't think that a lot of people understand there is a big difference in being arrogant and in being, what would be the opposite of being arrogant? What is the word I'm trying to think of? I was trying to think of this a minute ago because I had it and I lost it. People will mistake someone being confident. That's the word I was looking for.
Confident. Yeah.
Confidence and arrogance. There's a difference. And a lot of people are operating by ego and arrogance, and they think that they're actually operating from a more powerful state, and they're not. It's actually
Mhm,
a very low level state.
mhm, mhm. Has a low vibrational frequency, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, and it's so crazy because when with the ego, it feels so powerful at the time, but it is actually put
Mhm.
you in one of the least powerful positions that you can be in because you're not able then to use the 95% of your brain,
Right,
because you're now stuck in that 5%
right,
conscious hamster wheel.
right, right. Um, so I guess that's basically it. I started back to school just to learn and to self heal. And 12 years later, I ended up with 2 doctorate degrees and a, a healthy body, and just
A thriving
it was just
practice.
it happened. And
Yes.
so I went into private practice, and I've done I've been doing that for 12 years as well, since graduation. And I now have an accredited university, one in natural medicine and another in metaphysics. Metaphysics has been a very important part of the expansion of my Christian upbringing. Um, it's it's brought a wonderfully expanded understanding of my spiritual being. Um,
I have to
and
agree with you 100%
you know,
for
I
myself.
you know I never gave up my Christian background, because my dad was a Christian, was a Methodist minister, and I had that fundamental upbringing. But one thing I will contribute to uh, his his encouragement is he really encouraged me to think beyond what I was told.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate that. Um, think beyond what you are told and understand that your experience is also valid. And so I think my spirituality began to grow, not from what I was taught into what I was experiencing and what I could experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so so I yeah, I've been pretty out there with that with that. So we have a college of metaphysics anyway, and also a commercial nutraceutical company with proprietary blends of homeopathic homeoprophylaxis and also um, herbals.
Yeah,
So
your practice just is thriving. And then I know that you also have your podcast, which is how you and I initially got
uh
connected.
yes, vibrational perspectives.
Yes. And it's fabulous. I haven't watched it in a while. I've got to catch up. I'm a slacker.
Well, I'm going to be changing that format a little bit in the next couple of months. We're going to get back online and we're going to do some things with that as well.
Revamping.
But yes, we are going to revamp. Um, but anyway, I just I do what I do 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, and it's just what I do. I just do it because I do it,
Yeah.
and it's my passion, it's my purpose. And I wanted to say one more real quick thing that I think is a little it it is a probably a point that that you will understand and agree with. Um, talking about healing, I think one thing that I was very much experiencing within myself is, I had gone 45 years of my life not healing. And I was, like some people are slow bloomers, I was a slow healer. And I have oftentimes looked back on that and tried to explore why. And as I deal with clients daily, many of them are treatment resistant. And I had to go into understanding, why is a person treatment resistant?
Mm-hmm.
And I think one point that I want to make is that oftentimes we are so good and so adept at accommodating our illness. And rightly so, because that's what the primal brain will do. It accommodates survival. And when you're sick chronically, you accommodate your survival by accommodating your illness, to
Mm-hmm.
the point to where your whole identity is wrapped and intermingled and woven within the condition of your illness. And it is a very difficult step to learn how to break out of that accommodation, allow healing, and then take the personal accountability to learn new skills of health. It was very easy for me to be sick and agoraphobic in a 35-foot RV, and that piece of metal and fiberglass protected me from the rest of the world. And it was a comfortable place, but I realized it was my cocoon, and I would never break out to be and to live the purpose that I was intended if I allowed myself to stay in that accommodating place of comfort. And so many of my clients, I can see it as they are not, as they can be treatment resistant. They usually come to me because they're treatment resistant.
Well, I
And
was going to ask you to expound upon even that. Um, do you think that part of that is because they're so tired at that point that they just want an instant fix?
They
And,
do.
yeah, and there it really is no instant fix for self-healing.
No, no. It's one of two things. Either they're not willing to be disappointed once again.
Right.
Disappointment is a very difficult thing.
Mhm.
And they have had so many disappointments of non-recovery that they're used to just staying in that place of disappointment.
Mhm.
Um, it takes a lot of courage to break out of what you are so familiar with. And it takes a lot of courage to break out and go out on a limb and expect something outside and beyond another disappointment. But
Yes.
it's like I said before, it's a decision. You have to decide, I'm going to heal because that's what I choose. And I am willing to develop new skills of health rather than depend on the laurels of skills that I already have honed very well
Mhm.
of illness. It's
That's
it's like it's like learning a new language, and it's easier to go back and use the old language of of illness than it is to learn a new skill set of health. And
yeah.
it took me a while to do that. My first job was a 2 week um, job where my husband worked, just doing filing. And the first day I was on the job with him, I realized um, in, very clearly that I had no social skills. I
Mhm.
had lost my social skills, and I realized I was socially awkward. Well, I wasn't used to that. I didn't realize I had lost those skills to be able to interact in a workplace. But I learned the way to get through that is just to keep my mouth shut and lay low and just allow myself to get that back. And it was like riding a bicycle. In a couple of weeks, I was all okay, you know. But that's and to your point earlier, I think that's also what you said about giving up control.
Mhm.
I think that's a lot of it too. Um, if you've learned the skills to accommodate an illness, uh, it's a good place to stay in control.
Mhm.
But when you have
Safe
to
place.
learn when you have to learn new skills, suddenly you're out of control again, and you're exposed,
Mhm.
and you're out of your comfort zone. And it's not always straightforward. But
No, no,
but
absolutely. In fact, I think it is not straightforward at all, and that's what makes it so intimidating is that
mhm. Oh, it is.
there are so many different choices you can make when it comes to all of this, and because it boils down to a lot of self-discipline, which you've mentioned before, and self-discipline comes with self-accountability.
Mhm.
That's another one people don't like.
I'm all over self accountability.
Me
Because,
too.
oh, I am. And I think that's very fundamental in healing. It's taking responsibility. And what else, Audrey? I learned really quick after I'd been through eight eight neurologists, two epileptologists, and two neurologists, neuropsychiatrists, I should say. I learned, girl, it is not their responsibility to heal you.
Mm-hmm.
They are in a profession of support and guidance, but it in no way is their responsibility to heal you. And so many times, I think we go to doctors, we go to professional um, um, practitioners.
Yes.
We, of course, they have an accountability within their profession. Yes, agreed. But when push comes to shove, it is our responsibility to take accountability for our own health and decide that we are going to do everything in our power to allow
The healing.
that process to happen, allow that healing process to
That is perfectly, and that is perfectly put. I wanted to kind of close this out with just a quick tip on how someone would get started with self-healing, but you kind of just said it. It starts with self-discipline. If you can decide that you are willing to be self-disciplined, then you can do anything you want to do.
happen. I believe that, because that's when thought form, and form is in process.
Yes. Well, can you tell everyone how they can get a hold of you?
Oh, I certainly can. I am in Mineola, and I have a beautiful location here of an old historical home. But you can come here for for an appointment, face to face. But I also do a lot of teleconsultation. A lot of my people are just too sick to even get out of their rooms, and we start there. We start there with what we have. We start with what we have, and whatever we have is good, and we make it work.
You
So
meet people where they are.
right, exactly. But you can contact me at 903-569-9913. The name of my whole practice is Vitae Pondera, VitaePondera. And if you Google that, you'll see all of the different things that we have available for you. And there's not a condition that I do not accept or tackle. I have a lot of people with conditions that doctors just don't deal with, and they had no other choice. Morgellons is one of them, and I, I seem to have a kind of a reputation or referral. I get a lot of referrals by people saying that they heard about me because nobody else would take it.
Right.
But
That does
no,
happen sometimes. It's
it,
so crazy to think about that someone could be turned away, but it happens sometimes.
it does. And if your condition is so mysterious, we will figure it out, and we will write a paper, and we will co-author a book.
There you
That's
go.
just the way I work. I love learning about. My clients teach me a lot, so
Yeah.
we'll tackle anything that you have.
Well, thank you so very much for gracing us with your presence again, and thank you for all of the wonderful work that you do.
Oh, thank you, Audrey. You are such a pleasure to be with and to speak with, and I feel so honored to be on your shows. Every time you contact me, I get all excited about being on your shows.
I'm always
And I love
excited
it.
when you're on. I'm always excited when you're on. Well, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's episode. Every time I talk to Miss Heidi Hoke, I get all excited about all of the new things that I learn about the brain and how it works and all that kind of good stuff. I'm all into learning about self-growth. That's what this whole show is about, is personal growth and self-growth. And she always has some of the most wonderful insights into taking yourself from a lower vibration and raising that. And I always appreciate all of the tips and all the information that she gives. She's always willing to be raw and vulnerable and tell her story. And that is part of how we self-heal. And it's not an easy thing to do, but I would encourage you to step outside of your own self and to start to share your story a little bit. Share some of your failures, share some of your triumphs, And that way you can see that everything hasn't always been bad. That way maybe you can find what you need deep inside to find your place to self-heal. So until next time, just remember that you are not of this world.